our next speaker, I can believe we got more, right? We've got a day full here, don't we? Our next speaker is Alexia Pitter, and she's the Senior Outreach and Storytelling Associate for FAMM. Alexia works to elevate the voices of families directly impacted by incarceration. Guided by her own personal motto, I create the change I want to be. Alexia centers her community in every initiative she leads. That motto was passed down to her by her father, who is currently serving a 40-year sentence in the state prison. And it continues to shape her approach to advocacy and healing. So, Alexia's journey with FAMM began in 2022 as an intern. It was then that her love for this work really deepened, and she realized that she wasn't alone in navigating the hardships of the criminal justice system. And with expertise rooted in psychology, storytelling, and community-based advocacy, Alexia plays a key role in connecting with families and uplifting their experiences through multimedia storytelling, public engagement, and campaigns. Her writing has appeared in the Chicago Sun-Times, and she's been featured by the Chicago Tribune, another Chicago magazine, CBS Chicago, the Road News Network, and WBEZ Chicago. She holds a BS in psychology from Howard University and is currently pursuing her master's degree in clinical mental health counseling at Johns Hopkins University. She is a proud member of the Chi Sigma Iota. Let me just get my glass. Sorry. The Chi Sigma Iota, the International Honor Society that promotes academic and professional excellence in counseling. So please welcome Lexi Pitter, and her presentation today is entitled Stories That Move, Advocacy with Patience and Purpose. Hi, Alexia. Thank you for joining us. So great to have you.
Hi, everyone. Can you hear me?
We can.
All right. I love it. Welcome. I'm going to hop right in. Thank you so much for that amazing introduction. So, we're going to talk about today the power of storytelling, creating your advocacy plan, and moving with patience and purpose and sustainability. Hi, again. My name is Alexia Pitter, and it's such a pleasure to be here. So, just a little bit about our agenda. I will be moving a little fast just because there's a lot of information. For those who have the opportunity, please, this is a great opportunity to take out a note-taking device, a pen or paper. There's so much great, useful information in here. So, we're going to start by talking a little bit about FAMM. I was going to go into my why, but I think that introduction did it. So, thank you. We're going to talk about creating an advocacy plan, why storytelling is so important in this work. And how do you make use of your advocacy tools? So first, I'm going to play a little video. Please let me know if you can hear it about what FAMM does.
So, what does it mean to be a FAMM member? FAMM members are families who have loved ones in prison, people in prison, formerly incarcerated people, and anyone interested in reforming the criminal justice system. This means federal system and state system. It doesn't cost a thing, and the returns are priceless. FAMM members find chances to directly plug into making criminal justice reform happen, help in understanding the criminal justice system and your loved one's experiences in the system, up-to-date information and education about policies and laws that affect loved ones. Support from a huge community of people sharing the same experiences. Chances to share your own personal experience with the criminal justice system in ways that can have a real impact. Opportunities to make this world a better place. Welcome to the family.
All All right, so that is a brief introduction. We began in 1991 by our founder, Julie Stewart. Her brother was arrested for marijuana and sentenced to 5 years in prison, despite it being his first offense. And so, we often hear, the judge hands were tied because of mandatory minimums. And that is when Julie Stewart wanted to start this nonprofit organization. We started from just drug offenses to now covering all offenses. Some of the things that we do is we do advocacy workshops, which were mentioned. We work on legislation. And then we also have boots on the ground events and things like that. We don't work on individual cases. We really focus on getting as much people home as possible. We are nonpartisan. The reason that we've been able to do as much as that we can and that we have is because we're not associated with one side of the aisle or the other. We're really about working with whoever we need to in order to get as many people home. And of course, FAM's greatest assets are the stories. That is something that we pride ourselves on. What we've learned is that you can mention any data, statistic, any details in the case, but at the end of the day, it kind of comes down to the stories and putting a face to the name of policies. I'm going to skip the why just because we kind of already talked about me having my father, my best friend, Gasai Pitter, who's currently serving a 40-year sentence, and that's what's inspired me to do this work. So this is a part that I know a lot of us have been waiting for. You don't know how many people have called us and said, my loved one's incarcerated. I don't know what to do, where to start. It's super overwhelming, and I don't have thousands and thousands of dollars to pay for a lawyer. So this is a great way just to kind of break down the idea of an advocacy plan. So the first step of the advocacy plan is determining what is your why? Why are you doing this work? What is motivating you? And in the next slide, we'll add a little bit more details to give context. The other aspect is what kind of advocate do you want to be? So many people don't know there's so many different ways to advocate. And so sometimes as an advocate myself, I find myself putting my hands in too many pots. It's overwhelming. I feel burnt out. I'm feeling hopeless. And so this is really important in your advocacy plan to zone in on how do you want to contribute to your advocacy journey. And of course, storytelling. Storytelling is the core of everything that we do. One thing I tell our FAMM members is whether you're speaking in front of a judge, whether you're speaking to media outlets, whether you're speaking to legislators or just the general public, it's so important that you hone in on your story because your story is very unique to you. And then talking about what tools do I need, right? And I think I'm so grateful for this conference here because a lot of you all are learning about the tools that you have access to that maybe you didn't know about before. And that's so important in your advocacy journey. And then the last part, the most important part to me is what does success mean to you? How can you do this work sustainably, right? To a point where you're not burning out, that you still have energy to give. And that is so important. So let's dig a little deeper. So again, why? Why are you doing this work? Why is this work meaningful to you? What does it mean to be an ambassador of change? The reason why that question is so important is, for example, I've been doing this work for about 4 years. My loved one is still incarcerated, but I continue to do this work because my work has allowed over 3,000 individuals to come home. And so being an ambassador of change to me doesn't mean just focusing on getting my loved one home, but really pouring into this work to get as many people home as possible, because ultimately we need to stick together, we need a community, and we need to collaborate in order to make the most change. The other part that we talked about is the kind of advocate you want to be. So let me break that down a little bit. There's digital advocacy, right? So maybe for you, you're working all day, every day, you have a lot on your plate. You don't have time to be boots on the ground. You don't have the resources, but you do have social media platforms. And so what that may look like is sharing stories, encouraging your lawmakers to visit a prison, tagging your lawmakers online, tagging organizations such as FAMM and the other organizations that you've heard here today, right? That is a part of digital advocacy. You're advocating from behind your computer, behind your platforms, which is still as powerful as any other advocacy. Then there's legislation. Maybe you want to write a bill, right? So maybe the bill that you need to get your loved one home has not passed, and you want to be the one to create that bill, to pass it, to communicate with the different chambers to make sure it does that. And so that is something that you can absolutely do. That requires meeting with lawmakers, joining workshops that's walking you through how to create a bill, which is something that FAMM does do, and just really doing lobby days, things like that. Another aspect is maybe you don't have a loved one who's incarcerated, but this work just means a lot to you. And you want to be a spokesperson. You want to speak to students. You want to speak to media outlets, right? And that is, again, a powerful advocacy. But it's understanding that that's the lane that you choose to be in and really figuring out what tools work best for you in order to do that. And then, of course, boots on the ground, there's lobbying, there's hearings, and things like that. And then the next thing is, what tools do I need? So that's something we will be able to talk about towards the end, what tools FAMM provides. But really thinking about, okay, I know my why. I know what it means to be an ambassador of change. I know what advocate I want to be. And so what tools do I need in order to continue my journey? And then and then also what communities, organizations that I need to take part in. So I believe Natasha Blakely said this and it was perfect, that it's so important to collaborate in this work and build partnerships. And then again, what does success look like to you? How can this work be sustainable? So oftentimes what I see as our members is that we want to get our loved ones home. And sometimes that takes months, sometimes that takes years, sometimes that even takes more time. And so it's important that we create measurable, specific, tangible goals that are realistic, but doesn't allow us to burn out, because there's a high percentage of burnout in this work. So sometimes that means asking your loved one to advocate for themselves as well, right? So I know with my dad, I send him a list of lawmakers that he can send letters to. And so, in a perfect example of this is, we recently did a lobby day in Illinois. And a mother came in and said, hey, this is a picture of my son. This is our story. And the lawmaker, he was a senator, opened up his briefcase and he's like, wow, I have all these letters from the past year of the person that you're talking about, of your son. This is so exciting. I finally get to meet their mom. And so they were able to build a connection in that way, advocacy from both sides. And then, of course, building networks, coming to conferences like this, attending workshops, and more importantly than all of these things put together is self-care. And so I'm going to go back to the power of storytelling. And again, I know I'm moving a little fast into a lot of information, so feel free to ask additional questions in the panel. What we have found at FAMM is that what change hearts and minds isn't the data, isn't the analytics, isn't the details of the case. It is the power of storytelling. As humans, we connect through empathy. So one of the things I think about is, have you ever watched a movie and you see a character crying or going through a hard time, and then you're on the couch and you're like, what's going on? I'm crying too. This happens so often. And the reason, and it's interesting because we know this character is fake, we know the plot is fake, but our empathy comes out and we build a connection through storytelling, through empathy, and really understanding who someone is. And so that is why storytelling is so powerful. So on the next slide, I'm going to walk you through our recipe for our advocacy story. Over the years, we have found this recipe works. It's been super successful. It's what we use to pass a lot of our legislation. And so again, take time to write down the notes. And if you have questions, we can definitely go through that. All right, so the storytelling recipe. The first thing is knowing the difference between just telling your story and an advocacy story. An advocacy story is a persuasive story that ends with an ask. So many times, again, as someone who has my loved one incarcerated, as you can imagine, a 40-year sentence is very long. The first thing I want to do is go in blazing, and the system didn't do this, and you should have looked at the case, and all these other things, and the prisons suck, and all of those things may be true, but it's not going to be the most persuasive. And so we want to make sure that we are being persuasive and we're ending our story with an action. And so while doing that, we want to make sure it's as short as possible, right? So if you're speaking, we want to make sure it's less than 2 minutes. And if you are speaking to a lawmaker or you're sending a letter to a media outlet, we want to make sure that it's no more than a page. And I know what you're thinking. How am I supposed to tell my entire story in less than 1 page or less than 2 minutes? That is why this recipe is going to be helpful. So part of the recipe is to use vivid details and emotions so your listener feels like they're right there with you, right? So a lot of times I encourage starting your story with a sentimental memory. Now, if you're wondering, what does this have to do with my loved one? As many of you all have said, and I've heard throughout this conference so far, is that the media tells individuals that if your loved one did the crime, they have to do the time. We're told that they're just numbers. And oftentimes they're not seen as human beings. And so the first part of your storytelling is making sure that someone understands your loved one as a human. So if you're a mom, I always say start with a story about how did it feel to hold your child for the first time? How did it feel to help them ride that bike when they got older? A way to pull your lawmakers in, your audience in, media outlet in, so that they understand who your loved one is, not just their case, not just a number, but as a human. Another aspect is meeting your listener and reader where they are. So if you're going to speak with a lawmaker or even a media outlet, do the research, figure out where they are, and meet them in the middle. So what I've often done, and whether I'm doing lobby day or workshops, is if I see someone is a mother, or if our members see that a lawmaker is a mother, I'll tell them to say, "Hey, I noticed that you have your son, on your desk." I remember the first time I drove my son and dropped him off to school. I was crying for hours. Have you ever felt that? That is how you're building that connection, especially when there are individuals who are not involved in this work or don't fully understand the work as much as you do. Again, the goal is to be persuasive. And then, of course, don't forget to be emotional and personal, right? Because at the end of the day, this this experience impacts us. I know for me that when my dad calls, I always want to make sure I'm answering, even if I'm in school. So that means I have to explain to a lot of people, hey, I have to answer this call right now. Or sometimes when my dad's on lockdown, I'm nervous. I don't know if he's eaten, if he's seeing sunlight. And so whoever your audience is needs to understand how it impacts you, not just them, but you as well. Because as we all know, the sentence doesn't just impact them, but it impacts the family unit. And then, of course, ending with an action. So if we're going in and we're just saying all these things and we don't give them something to do, no one's going to know how to help. And so even maybe it's a media outlet. I'm telling you my story so that you can think of sharing my story in your next series, or, next story. Or if you're speaking to a lawmaker, I'm telling you my story so that you can consider clemency for my loved one. And so really ending with an action. So as you're telling them who your loved one is, as you're meeting them where they are, they know exactly what to do afterwards. So here's an example of what my advocacy story would be. And it doesn't have to be the exact thing. So my name is Alexia Pitter, and my father, Gasai Pitter, has been incarcerated in Illinois for 25 years, serving a 40-year sentence. I remember the day he left like it was yesterday. In fact, it was Father's Day. I was 3 years old. He kissed me on my forehead and said he'd be back soon, but he never came home. Every birthday, every graduation, there was an empty seat where my dad should have been. Over the years, we rebuilt our relationship through letters and visits. In one letter, he wrote, "Can you believe it? My child made it to Johns Hopkins." When he found out I'd been accepted into the clinical mental health counseling master's program, he broke down crying, so proud of me, but pain knowing his absence shaped my life so much. Since then, he's done the hard work to change. He's earned his high school diploma, completed over 15 rehabilitation programs, including House of Healing, Inside Out Dad. Each program helped him grow emotionally, spiritually, and mentally. His dream now is to open up a barbershop that provides food and shelter for homeless youth, in his words, to give back more than he's taken from the world. But my dad's health is failing. He has stage 3 kidney disease, and every canceled medical appointment feels like time is slipping away. Recently, I asked him, "Dad, are you going to make it home?" He said he tried to be there for my graduation or maybe even my wedding. We both know it's a long shot. But my dad, being the dad he is, he didn't want to disappoint his baby girl. So he told me he'd try. I'm sharing our story because it would mean the world to me if my daddy could see me walk across the stage. My father has proven his transformation through consistent good behavior and years of rehabilitation. And that's why I'm asking you to vote yes on HB 2367 to give everyone in Illinois prisons with an outdate equal access to incentives for rehabilitation through both good behavior and the successful completion of programming. And so that's my advocacy story. So in the chat, if you can, I want you to just write, what are the things that you learned about my story? How did you feel when you heard my story? What words struck out to you? What felt persuasive? And do you feel like after hearing my story, you got to realize who my dad is and my relationship with my dad? These are things that are so important to think about when you're sharing your story. Again, we can say the facts and figures, we can give the analytics, we can tell the details of the case, the judge didn't do this, there was witness tampering, et cetera, et cetera. And all those things are absolutely accurate because we know how this works in the system. However, we want to be persuasive. When we're leaving telling our story, we want whoever we're talking to remember their name, to think of them as a human, to think about their experience, and to provoke empathy. All right. So, we're getting close to the end. Now let's talk about making use of your advocacy tools. So, FAMM provides a lot of different tools and resources, no matter what type of advocate you want to be. I would want to clarify that FAMM typically works on, we're in about 24 states, both federal and states prisons. We don't work on anything before someone gets sentenced or after. So, we're not working on reentry just because we don't have the resources for that. Or spending time in jail and things like that because we also don't have the resources. But from the moment someone is sentenced to the moment we're released, we're working on legislation, we're providing advocacy workshops, and we also go inside the prisons to do advocacy workshops, storytelling workshops, and things like that. So we have a Families in Action Facebook group. It has over 10,000 members. So sometimes we're not able to answer certain questions, but we love our FAMM members because everyone takes time to respond to individuals, to encourage them, to answer any questions they may have, and it really feels like a community. We also have an Ask the President workshop, or I should say Zoom call. You get to speak to our president. Just tell her what you're going through. She's so spectacular. Her name is Dr. Shaniva D. McReynolds. She's been on both sides of the criminal justice system. Her husband was murdered, and she never found out who was the person who murdered her husband. But she still chooses to do this work because the husband that she's with now, who was her former best friend, they actually got married in the prison. It was like a 2 minute wedding. They're so in love. They actually are like couples goals. And so she just loves to hear what are your concerns? How can she make the organization better? We also have a contact your lawmaker tool. So if you're thinking, well, I want to reach out to my lawmakers, I don't know how, I don't know who they are, we have a tool where you put in your address and then you have their contact information. We also have templates where maybe you're not there yet to write your entire story or to know exactly what to ask for. And so you can just put in a few details and then you can just send it directly to them. We have a policy resource library for anyone who's interested in writing bills. So you can see kind of precedents, policies that we worked on, what worked, what didn't work. And then, of course, our advocacy workshops, which I mentioned before, policy workshops, policy briefings, storytelling workshops. And then we have conferences. So just recently, I think 2 months ago, we flew in 70 formerly incarcerated individuals and their family, and they were able to come to DC, and of course, hearings. And the last thing I'll just say is the power of sustainability. Please make sure that you fill your cup. Please make sure you take care of yourself. You can't pour into an empty cup. All right. And that's it for me.
Wow, Lexi, thank you so much. The training is so specific, so well thought out. For many people, I think they want to do something and they have a question like, well, how do I get started? Where do I go? What do I do first? Right? Your training is so right on. In fact, that people can actually initiate getting legislation written and passed. And most people don't think they can do that. They think somehow that's like a distant, there's no way they could be part of getting a law written and a law passed. And to find out, no, there's a specific way that a law gets written and a specific way that it goes through committee and gets to the floor and gets voted on, that you give that kind of training. And the storytelling you're talking about, it is what connects us, isn't it? So I just appreciate the thoughtfulness you've given to the training you're providing. Really extraordinary. Thank you so much for sharing that with us. So encouraging, so helpful.